Hi, hello. My name is Revenge Isaiah, and we are going to be doing a very basic tutorial on how Voicemeeter works and what it do and why I think it's amazing. Generally speaking, it is effectively a advanced voice program designed to replace Windows audio mixer, basically. Does have a few features and really cool, interesting things. Not every single version of Voicemeeter is going to look this complex. This is their latest iteration called Voicemeeter Potato, which I find is amazing and I make the best use out of it. But there are other versions, most notably Voicemeeter and then Voicemeeter Banana. Each one of those is kind of one step below. So Voicemeeter Banana having one less, or I think believe one or two less hardware inputs and a couple less hardware outputs, and completely lacks any special effects slots or anything like that. Whereas Voicemeeter, I believe, only has two hardware inputs and two hardware outputs. So it's very basic and kind of stripped down. And so, am I going to cover everything? Absolutely not. I'm basically just going to be covering things that I personally use both on stream and in sort of the day-to-day life when it comes to recording. I am using Streamlabs OBS to record this because it's easier. And yeah, so just really quickly, quick startup guide here. Install Voicemeeter, then reboot the computer once it's installed. Second thing you want to do after that, you're probably not going to get any audio. So the second thing you need to do is configure your default audio devices and set them up as Voicemeeter input as the default. What does that mean? It effectively means, let me see if I can find it here. It's not on there, it's over here. So let's there it is. So you're going to want to set your default, whatever it is. Whoops. You're going to want to set it over to the Voicemeeter input. That is going to be your default for everything, both your playback and communication. Same thing for recording. You're going to go all the way down. You're going to find your Voicemeeter output, not the aux output or the VAIO. You want the Voicemeeter output. It will say Voicemeeter output. That's universal across all three versions of Voicemeeter. You want that as your default device. That's basically it. There's a couple other things you can check out while you're there. I will be going over them slightly later, but we'll sort of do that for now. Now, once that's all set up and ready and good to go, you want to make sure that you launch Voicemeeter if it doesn't automatically launch. Most of the time on a fresh install, Voicemeeter will not automatically launch, so you will have to find the program, launch it, and it'll pop up. Then you're going to have to want to select a audio device for your main output. Your main output is going to be A1. A1 is universal across all three versions of Voicemeeter, so you want to find the one that works best for you. In my case, it is my USB audio codec, which is technically my Behringer Q802, which is what I'm using to record and all that stuff. Once you have your output selected, you will effectively be able to hear again. Congratulations, you've got up that far. If you haven't and you're watching this, then clearly something's gone wrong along the way. Second thing you want to do, after you have the ability to hear once again, you want to go and hit menu and you want to make sure that it is in the system tray and it runs at startup. Why do you want that? Because this is going to replace Windows as your audio mixer, which is the point. If you don't have it run at startup, you're going to have conflicts every single time you open up Voicemeeter. So by having it run at startup and having it in the system tray, it's going to default to this instead of Windows Audio Meter, because Windows Audio Meter sometimes, quite frankly, is kind of trash. Make sure that's always on. There's a couple of things you have selected that you don't need to select, but it is something you can, take into consideration. Make sure that the application itself is visible on startup, so that when your computer starts up, you will be able to see Voicemeeter immediately with most things. I also have macro buttons set up to run whenever Voicemeeter is done loading. The macro buttons are basically just shortcuts that I have set up for my own personal use that I like having on. It's kind of up to you what you'd like to do with them. I'll be covering them a little bit later in this sort of tutorial. Now, real quickly, in case you have any sort of problems either installing Voicemeeter or having something weird happen during it, do keep in mind that Voicemeeter is effectively an audio driver, meaning that if it's not working properly or you're getting weird sounds or static, always make sure that it is installed correctly, meaning that you follow the steps exactly as marked both in the first time user guide and kind of in here. Once you've installed Voicemeeter the first time, it will ask you to reboot your device. If you don't do that and decide to try to open up Voicemeeter, chances are it's not going to work, or if it does work, it's not going to work properly. So do make sure you reboot first, then launch Voicemeeter after you've rebooted, and make sure you default everything to Voicemeeter. Now, we've already set up our audio devices effectively. Now, if you want to set up a recording device, it's very easy. You have your hardware inputs over here. You select the device you want. Mine is the microphone 2, which is basically what I need here. I also have a couple other things installed here. We will be going over those a little bit later. All right, so very briefly talking about Voicemeeter virtual inputs. Your virtual inputs are effectively what you hear. And I mean that quite literally. This section here is connected to your audio hardware out, meaning your speakers, your headset, whatever the case may be. That's what this is connected to. Your Voicemeeter auxiliary and your VIO 3, those are usually typically recorded in software and not something you physically hear. You can't put it up as monitors. That's somewhat more of an advanced step that really I'm not going to cover, because this is just basic setup plus like stream setup. So that's what this is going to be. Let me just make sure I'm following along here. Oh, while I'm here, we'll very briefly go over the modulation panels here. The panels are kind of what they sound like. They make things happen. You have your IntelliPan system, which is effectively whether it's stereo or not. That's really all it does. You can do really cool stuff with it. I don't use any of it with the exception of the voice color panel, just to make the voice sound a little bit better and a little bit deeper for everybody involved, because it does sound a little bit nicer. It's not enough to make a huge difference that like this is my voice in real life, but it does make it a little richer. That's all it really does. Next thing you want to talk about here real quickly, I don't believe this is a feature in the base version of Voicemeeter, but I believe Banana and obviously Potato have this. It is called your audio ability. Actually, I believe the original version of Voicemeeter does have an audio ability meter, which combines the gate and compressor. Doesn't work too well. This one, they are split. So you have your compressor here and you have your gate here. You kind of just adjust these to match whatever your recording environment sounds like. So if you have a lot of background noise and a mic that's particularly hot, obviously your gate's going to be a little louder, or rather higher. You can have a secondary noise gate on your recording software. In this case, my Streamlabs OBS, I don't have the gate on that, but I do have a secondary compressor. We'll be getting into that a little bit later. And you've also probably noticed I do have Equalizer set up on pretty much everything. This is exactly what it sounds like. It is a fully fledged Equalizer system. This is the setup that I use to make everything sound better, both on stream and when I'm talking on Discord. I mean, feel free to use these numbers to your advantage if you'd like. Everybody's voice is a little bit different. This sounds best for me, just because my voice is a little bit deeper. And it probably might not work for you if you have a slightly higher pitched tone of voice, but feel free to mess around with it and listen to yourself as you're messing around with the equalizer. I won't be going over, in the master section you have all these things, you have your stereo repeats, your normal modes. I'm not going to be going over them very much because those are advanced features that really aren't necessary. They're nice to have and they're kind of cool, but you don't need them for stream setup here effectively. Yeah, I'm just checking my notes here to make sure I've covered pretty much everything that needs to be covered in order to figure out what you need to do. And I believe we have. So really briefly, I'm going to touch back on these things. This is your virtual audio cables. These are also programs from VB Audio Software. They are technically free. You know, they are donationware. And I have the cable A and B package. I believe they recently released like cable C and D. So you can have just a bunch of cables flying around everywhere. These are not physical cables. They are digital inputs. Here we go. Here they are. And as of right now, they are not actually doing anything. They are just hanging out, ready for input effectively. I use it to set up my music and Discord pretty separately because they're fairly necessary when you're setting up a stream, because you want to have those things on separate channels so you can control the volume independently without affecting the audio in your headset. So what do I mean by that? Quite simply, for example, let's just kick on some music here real quick and we'll sort of adjust it as need be. So let's just hit that. Relatively royalty free, I hope. Now you'll see cable A is picking up the music there, which is the point. You also hear that the music is obviously on the recording itself. Now, if I scroll this up and down, you won't hear a difference in the music audio because this is currently being played only through my headset, technically. And now here's a real question. It's like, well, how are you getting it over to cable A? This is where a new audio program comes into play. This is called Audio Router. It's an old program and it still works because it's fantastic. But basically what Audio Router does, it does exactly what it sounds like it does. It takes audio from a source and moves it over to a different output. So in this case, it's moving it over to our virtual cable A. And you can see I have it jacked up to 100 because I control the volume over here and not here. I also don't control it on the app. On the app, I have it maxed out and all the audio is being solely controlled through, or rather the audio volume is being controlled through Voicemeeter. How am I getting it onto stream? Well, on stream, it's a little bit different. So let's pull that up. Ooh, Inception. So here we have a bunch of stuff, blah, 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 blah. Here we have our music. This is let me see here. We have here an audio output capture. And I told it to capture specifically cable A, which is my music. And you see here, I have it turned all the way down to negative 32 decibels, which is a pretty good sound there. The other thing I did, I added a filter on top of it, which is a compressor. Feel free to use these settings. This is generally speaking a pretty good setting, typically used only for voice applications. But in this case, I just kind of adapted to work for music because it works pretty well, which is why it's a little bit clearer and has a very solid limit there. Same thing is applied to my microphone here. My microphone also has a filter on it. Basically, same thing. In fact, I believe it's exactly the same with a slight output gain increase. And that's all well and good. You're probably noticing here that I also have my virtual cable B, which is set to Discord, not actually taking anything. That's because Discord is amazing and I thought of that. So in Discord, pull this forward, we have here the basic settings of Discord that I use. My input device is defaulted. It's going to be Voicemeeter because that's my default audio device. But my output device, I specifically set it up for virtual audio cable B. And you'll notice I have the output volume set up a little bit higher just because I want to compensate for that. So because my output is set up as cable B, if I had anybody else in my Discord talking to me, they would be showing up here. Which is pretty cool. Which is why I can control the volume independently there, but I can also control it on Streamlabs here or on your own stream. If you're using OBS, you can use it there, same thing. See here, we have another audio output capture. This one's specifically capturing cable B. And if you hear here, I have it set up at negative 10.3 decibels. If anybody was talking on Discord, you'd see the levels there. I'm gonna stop my music. So that's pretty much the setup here. The desktop audio is capturing everything but my voice, in case you were wondering. And you're probably also wondering, and I didn't touch on this a little bit earlier, well, why do you have A1, A2, A3 selected? What does that do? Why is that there? Well, like I said, this here is controlling everything you hear. Coincidentally, that also controls everything your desktop hears. So if you have A1 set up for your desktop, it's capturing pretty much everything. YouTube, video games, defaulted devices that aren't selected to specifically go to like cable A or B. That's where it's going. Now, on your desktop audio setting on your stream, for example, it'll pick up everything else basically. So if I had like a video running in the background, you would see it rolling through the desktop audio. In fact, let's go ahead and just set up a really quick YouTube video. Just play the first thing that shows up here. Yeah, sure, why not? So you see there, desktop audio is being played, and that is syncing up to my random YouTube video there. Pretty cool. And more specifically, let me try to move that out of the way so you can kind of see what's going on there. You see it there being played through my A1 and A2. It's pretty loud. Very cool. That's basically what that does. I believe that's everything we need to very briefly cover. There's a few other things here I will touch on very briefly. What does B1, B3, all that stuff means? That is effectively your microphone output. So whenever you're setting up things for streaming and things like that, you want to make sure that B1 is selected because that is your main audio out. Or rather, main audio in, I guess you could actually call it, because it is taking up your microphone and moving it along. You'll see I don't have it selected here on the main because I don't want the desktop to pick it up. I only want my audio recording to pick it up, which is to say this thing is picking it up here. So this is very specifically picking up my microphone, even though it says mic aux, that's exactly what it is, which is fantastic. Now, if you were in theory, if you were to select your main output here, if you were to select B1, you would get a looping effect, which I'm not going to do because it really messes up your audio. Same thing for your music. My friends often are sort of the victim of me playing random music through Discord. I use this here to capture it basically. So I'll hit a button effectively and it will turn up my music through the microphone channel and basically play it through that. It's pretty funny and pretty awesome. And you're probably wondering how I did that. Well, we're very briefly going to touch on macros here, which I only have 3. I could have more. I haven't bothered to do that because they are a little tricky to set up, but once you have them set up, they're very, very useful for what they do. See here, I have a restart button, the troll button, and the Discord mute button. And they do exactly what it sounds like. They will mute things on a button press. I can, have it set up for a shortcut key as well. So I can push the button or I can use my keyboard shortcuts to do that. Same thing with this thing. If I could click on it, it does that. If I unclick it, it does that. And the restart would just restart the entire audio engine. If I ever have a problem, if something isn't recording properly, if, I don't know, if Discord decides to explode, you hit the restart button, the entire audio engine restarts, and typically they'll fix the problem. Normally you do it through here. You see here a restart audio engine. That's normally what you would do it from. Alternatively, you can set it up as a macro. And if you're interested in what that macro looks like, that's it. That's literally all it is. Command.restart equals 1. Welcome to basic programming, I guess, too. Alternatively, You can have it set up to do this as well, where you have it specifically to do a command. So you have it fade to a -6 decibels and 45 hundredths of a second, which is basically, I think, 3-4 seconds. And it's very specifically calling out what it needs to do. Yes. And, same thing here. Very basic. Strip 2, mute equals 1, mute equals 0. That's all it does. Now, if you're wondering what all those actually mean, there is a Voicemeeter macro guide that it will give you a very basic overview of how that works and how you can set it up. But generally speaking, this is a strip. So this is strip 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Your main is listed as your overall, I believe, gain, and so on and so forth. You can have things macroed to pretty much every setting on the panel here. That includes on your basic Voicemeeter, banana, potato. They all have the ability to be macroed to death. And probably one of the more interesting ones that people aren't aware of is you can actually set up a macro to specifically call up a recording here. So you can very specifically if you want something to play on this, or if it, typically you can use it to record, but you can also set up something to be played here. So you can load in a laugh track, you can load in a song, you can load in whatever the hell you want, really. Have a macro set up to call it up and it will play it automatically. I'm not going to show you how to do that because I myself don't really understand how it works. It is something I'm still working on, but once I do figure it out, I'll basically just add it onto this thing. And like I said, I'm not covering every single thing because I'm just showing you the very basics of how things work in Voicemeeter and what I personally use. So these are all my personal settings. Obviously, feel free to use them because I did show them on screen. Have fun with that. If you have any other questions, concerns, comments, anything else you want me to talk about briefly, feel free to send me a message or just be like, hey, I have a question. It's like, I probably have an answer for you, bud. And I guess what I'm really briefly also going to touch up on here right at the very end is this specific area, your special effects. This is not present in Voicemeeter or Voicemeeter Banana. This is exclusively a Voicemeeter Potato thing. We have the ability to use reverb and delay. That's all it is. It's pretty cool. I use it to great effect. It is by no means necessary, but it is hilarious to use. So feel free to use that whenever the hell you want. If you decide to get Voicemeeter Potato, great. If you don't, like I said, there are 2 other applications that will replace your current audio mixer. And in my opinion, this is the much better version of it. One last thing I want to touch on here before I go, you'll notice that I do have something set up very specifically there. Let me see if I can find the section I'm looking for here, because it is pretty important, and I do want to make sure I talk about it. Okay, so your audio A1 device configuration, which is to say, in this case, my USB audio, my Behringer. That device configuration gives the main audio configuration of Voicemeeter and the virtual ASO driver, which means to say that is your sample rate and buffer size. It also indicates all your audio processing done in Voicemeeter will be based on those sample rates. If some of those audio points work from a different sample rate, the conversion will be done upwards to match the main sample rate. So if your main sample rate, so if your A1 has a terrible sample rate, the rest of your audio also is going to have terrible sample rates. So do make sure you select your best sample rate device. So in my case, because my best sample rate device is my Behringer, that's what I'm using as my main A1. Even if I don't use it all the time, it is the main sample rate that I want from, because it is studio quality or close to it sample rates. You know, it's 48 hertz, 512. That's exactly what you want. So actually, it will say up here 48 kilohertz 512 sample rate. That's exactly what you want. Some people use 44 and 512, and those all work. Those are really good sample rates. If you have a sample rate that's lower than that, you will hear slight degradation. Most of the time, it's unnoticeable, but for the most part, you do want to try to keep it very consistent, because otherwise you're going to have a bunch of problems that you really don't want to end up dealing with. So, yeah. I think that's it. I think I've covered everything that I need to cover. Yeah, if you have any suggestions and things I didn't cover or you want me to see covered, I will do my best to do those things. But again, very basic setup. I didn't go over like bit rate or anything like that because I don't think I need to. But if I do need to, or if you want suggestions for that, go for it and let me know. I'll probably just respond in text format or on Discord. Yeah, I think that's it. I hope this helps. If it didn't, I apologize. But this is how I set it up, and this is what's worked for me this last like 4 years. So yeah, GG everybody. See you.